So hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am Laura Forlano. I am a professor in art and design and communication studies, and I am the interim director for the Center for Design. So I'm delighted to welcome you to this third conversation of the fall semester. I just wanted to introduce with a couple of slides about the Center for Design and some of the work that we've been doing here. My slides are not advancing. I thought they would. There we go. Okay, so for the Center for Design team, our founding director, Paolo Chiarelli, I'll leave this semester, but we'll be back in January. Myself, Estefania Chilota, there at the back, Julie Farkas here, and Katie Kim here is the team. And as you might know, the Center for Design hosts a number of different events throughout the year, often the monthly conversation series, but we've also brought major conferences to campus. And we are, this is a space that's shared by all faculty within CAMD, so we're often the host of many other events as well. So just to give you a sense of some of the events that have happened recently, here's sort of a portfolio. And the first two sessions of the fall, the first was the Perspectives on Design and Money, moderated by Nathan Feld. And then last month we had Truth in the Age of Algorithms, moderated by Sophie Meyer. So today I'm glad to be here to host this session, led by Sara Hendren and Grace Jun on disability X fashion, adaptive clothing for everybody. And with that, I will turn it over to Sara.
Thank you, Laura, and really glad to be here with all of you. I'm Sara Hendren. I'm an associate professor in my home department in art and design, and I have a joint appointment at the School of Architecture. Welcome, come on in. We got lots of seats up here. Glad to see you. And like my colleague Laura Forlano, I work on design research in the area of disability at different scales. I'm really lucky to have Laura as a colleague, and also Meryl Alford, who's here at CAMD, and Leanne Chukowski, who's between here and engineering, and Matthew Goodwin, and Moitreya Das, and who else? Like we have a really interesting number of people, Jody Santos in journalism, a lot of people here working on disability as it meets the built world and design and media. So it's a pleasure to welcome our colleague in this work today, Grace Jun, who is a kind of perfect blend of interests that bring students to CAMD because she's worked between industry, academic research, she's a nonprofit sector, and entrepreneurial business. So I've got today her book, which is the occasion of our bringing her here this year, called Fashion, Disability, and Co-Design. I'll pass it around to you all because it's unlike probably a lot of academic books that you've seen. It's put out by Bloomsbury, but it is 14 case studies with a lot of how-tos and even like pattern drawings and checklists for kind of design research and pocket placement. I mean, so it's a really beautiful blend of both this position of how to go about best practices and a high integrity human-centered design process, but also like this very like practical, pragmatic how-to list if you're curious about, especially about fashion, and that's a new kind of scale of design for you. I'm also really pleased to have Gabby Garcia here, who's from Northeastern CAMD, and our makerspace. Hello, come on in. Our makerspace says multiple to talk to you at a key moment in our conversation about what's available at Northeastern, and especially at CAMD, in the world of sewing, textiles, smart fabrication, fashion in general, because we just knew anytime Grace is in the room, students, I think naturally, and the rest of us also get kind of itchy fingers to go and make some things. So I hope that will be the after effect for you. I'll just read now both of the bios for our guests, and then Grace will show some slides from the book and from her career. She and I will talk a little bit about that trajectory. So both kind of where she's been and what she's done, and now landing in academia, and a little bit about the book. if you, especially as students here and online, if you have further questions about her pathway in particular, I know that is often a burning interest to students who want to work kind of in between disciplines and domains. And Grace is your gal. You're kind of like, how do I forge new kind of ways of bringing together my interests? So that is all open to you. Well, she and I will have a kind of moderated discussion. Gabby will say some words as well about resources here at Northeastern, and of course, we'll allow plenty of time for your questions, which we welcome. And there's snacks in the back because we love you. Hello, welcome. Come on in. Come to the front, please. You'll want to see some of these images. Okay, so I'm going to read bios now. Named in Vogue Business 100 Innovators of 2025, Grace Jun is a tenured associate professor at the University of Georgia, where she examines the intersection of disability and collaborative design processes. In this space, she researches how accessibility is created and negotiated within graphic design and fashion, spotlighting how creative making in these fields actively constructs inclusive practices. Her latest book, released by Bloomsbury Publishing, Fashion, Disability, and Co-Design, offers a curated sampling of design processes inclusive of disability and a close investigation into specific clothing applications. Grace has held different positions in the tech industry, academia, and entrepreneurial business. This has influenced her work to be interdisciplinary, leading her to become a founding member of the national award-winning disability nonprofit called Open Style Lab, which genuinely has been life-changing to former students of mine from Moreland College and set their trajectory of students who did that experience in the summer. I will urge you to check it out. Grace has been asked to speak about disability and design in numerous studies around the world and has been featured in Forbes, The Washington Post, and NY Times Style. She's also a proud alumnus of both Parsons School of Design and RISD, majoring in design and technology and graphics. Gabby Garcia is an alum of the Industrial Design Program at the Rochester Institute of Technology, also a lively disability and tech scene at RIT, where he studied woodworking, CAD modeling, and user-centered design for fabrication. As the Creative Technologies Lab coordinator here at Northeastern, he oversees the management and operations of the Creative Tech Lab, one of 4 Canopy maker spaces. He curates training curricula for the space, which includes physical computing, digital fabrication, and textile/fiber art fabrication methodologies. So he's your guy here today. His design work currently focuses on space and systems optimization and building a sample library for the Creative Tech Lab. So join me in just welcoming. So Grace, I want to hand it over to you to talk to us a little bit about your career, and then you and I can have an exchange, further discussion. But where's yours?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. I was wondering if the slides are something you guys want to see now and we could put up as we go through.
I think that probably makes sense unless you want to say some words up front. But I think showing us some things is a good idea.
Sounds good. And thanks for having me. So I think hopefully I'll be able to put this on widescreen. Can everyone see this?
Thank you.
Perfect. So yes, I really hope, I mean, I'm being selfish here, but I would love to hear from you. If you ever get a chance to read my book, buy it, even secondhand thrifted, I don't care. I just would love to hear from people's feedback. It took me 8 years to write this book, and it took me 8 years because of a lot of logistics, copyright, permissions. I really wanted to get it right and to honor also a lot of the disability leadership and collaboration that I've had throughout my decade in this field. Most importantly, I think I wanted to have a book that was practical for student application. So it's not just about, the history, or it's about, just my opinion and perspective, but it has a lot of, I think, real life examples. And I can't tell enough that I hope that it'll be very useful to any designer or any creative in this field. But you'll see within the book that I really talk about and show images that kind of juxtapose each other. And I wanted to share this image because I get this question often from industry people to students, alumni and young adults, and they always ask, inclusivity and accessibility are indeed important, but like, how do you actually implement it? And I get this question all the time, every talk I do, every lecture. And I really find it in some subtlety within fashion itself. And here you have an example of Hermes in the summer of 1994, photographed for Bloomsbury Publishing. And I picked this particular garment because it's a subtle kind of opposition that I often see emerge within fashion, where, of course, you think of haute couture, and Hermes is one of those examples, but the horse riding, the esquitarian, the functional aspects of this garment with front pockets have been already kind of explored and put into perspective in a runway at a level where that we see in contrast today with some of the things that are called adaptive apparel, which is apparel designed for people with disabilities. And so on the right, you see Zappos Adaptive. They have these pants with purposefully designed pockets for the front. So things like your keys, your cell phone, or other important stuff that you want to carry along with you in a seated position or as a person using a wheelchair would feel more confident in doing so. And so I put this together because really it's about a similar dialogue I see in fashion. I don't know how much you guys have been seeing Runway or thinking about the Met Gala, but every time I take a look at those kind of themes, I see it more for similar dialogues or language. And I saw it in Carolina Herrera Spring. I saw it in Dior this year, this kind of pirate romanticized themes where you get kind of tailored or relaxed trousers fit with chiffon and really silk kind of shirts. And this kind of odd pairing of stuff, I think really is where fashion is really able to blend the unlikely, and they do it so well. And that kind of asks for a lot of uncomfortability and contrast. And so this is my own work that I done back in grad school when I decided to join, I guess, my friends, as I think, Sarah, you know, Grace Teo and Alice back at MIT and doing Open Style Lab. And I was talking to them about this project. I was living this project, but pretty much I was getting uncomfortable with the notion of working with a large group of women who had breast cancer surgery, because I happened to also just dive into their workshop group one Saturday morning. And I was like, this is ridiculous. We really need to find a better solution about how to think about getting ranges of motion for physical therapy for people who are recovering from breast cancer surgery delivered to their therapist in a more accurate, in a more daily way. So basically, I worked with Dorothy, who lived right across Parsons, and she was a breast cancer survivor. And she said she pretty much raises her arms up and down every day, putting her back against a wall. And she kind of gauges how she's recovering or feeling that way. And that's how she had been communicating with her therapist for almost 5 years. And so I tried this out. I was like, you know what? This isn't going to be commercial, but I think this is going to be helpful. And I put a gyroscope, I put a couple of features where I embedded silver thread, decided to use some coding knowledge that I picked up from Parsons and from industry. And I picked out those measurements and also those data that was carried from her arm movement to then be transferable to a private server for the physical therapist. And long story short, I was basically trying to test, we have so much available to us. We're in a time and period where now there's AI, there is different types of technology as tools we could access, but what is that really all for? Who is that really for? And how could we really leverage it to really serve society at its best? And so this was my first experiment of trying that out. Meaning, regardless of if you're in master's or PhD program, it's never too late to experiment and make things. That led me to a lot of experience from working with Open Style Lab. And as Sarah had mentioned, it's a national award design nonprofit that started at MIT in 2014, sorry, it's been over a decade. And we are located in New York at the moment, but we do have a chapter and alumni in Boston, which is why I had gotten to know Sarah, because she came as a guest lecturer on a wonderful summer lunchtime evening and talk to the students. And pretty much we have a system where we gather engineers, therapists, and designers from all types of backgrounds to work with a person with a disability for 10 weeks. And this program kind of investigates disability agency, it investigates participatory learning, and also what does it mean to work in an interdisciplinary group, and how that's negotiated, discussed, and of course creatively explored. And in my book, I talk about this because there are a couple of methods and how-tos and practical, I guess, pamphlets, information, data that I've prepared over the last decade. And this one being one of the more simpler kind in my book, was using dressing as an observational opportunity. And this simple template that I've given to many students and fellows in the past 10 years really kind of asks to detail out the dressing experience. And also if there is articles of clothing, or if you ever opened up your own wardrobe or someone else's, how would you describe their style? And what does it take to maybe put a piece of garment on and to take it off, which is don and doff in occupational therapy language. So this pretty much template was applied to, I think maybe I've done more than 50 different unique cases. And this one being with a friend of mine called Rachel Handler, and she's a aspiring Broadway actress, but also an amputee. And Rachel really wanted to have more empowerment, authenticity, and also autonomy. And she's riding the subway or any public transportation to disclose her disability when she wanted to and to hide it when she wanted it to. And so she would get also like unprovoked comments or strange remarks on the subway from strangers, but she would also have to show her amputation on stage in the Broadway theater, and of course, other types of interviews that she was doing. In doing so, we thought about something transformative. And in fashion, there's so many patterns and garments where you could kind of bring different exposures of the body to light. And so this one was a skirt that you could wrap inside and out. It also showed the left leg when she wanted to, or the right leg. And the students really kind of were able to investigate and work with Rachel on her color palette, her unique sense of style that she had already developed as an actress, and kind of also revisited her home and also her studio. They explored many other ways to capture how she wanted to express herself through actual practices and applications of like hardware types of materials. So for example, they ended up picking wool as their final material of choice, and it was a wool denim. This material was donated by Woolmark, and it's a particular material that is breathable, but it also just looks like a piece of denim on the outside. It's ultra light, and it's great for thick stitching on the edges to be able to carry weight and to be transferable. And so this kind of demonstrates their journey and exploration with Rachel. And that really kind of tied it all back with another exercise that I introduced, which is journey mapping. So basically, I could tell you guys 100 times, how does Rachel get from her home to an audition and back? But for the real designer, I think you really have to experience it. You really have to follow who your user is. And so the students had thought about, okay, we're going to spend 2 afternoons seeing how Rachel goes to an audition, and then what that looks like as a journey from her house, and what that looks like in terms of an emotional experience, the phase of the journey, and also external factors like the environment and the weather. And so from this, they took out a couple of really great examples, and I'll stop sharing. But they took out some great examples to make her skirt. So that is just one of the many 14 examples from my book that you could see.
Thank you, Grace. And the book is going around the room for people who are here in person, and welcome everybody who's come in to the online space too. I hope you'll know we're monitoring the chat for your questions later on. So Grace, I mean, you're very modest, about Open Style Lab and its origins. I wonder if you can talk us through a little bit of how you went from working at Samsung to becoming a nonprofit founder, and the kind of, if you can remember back, it's often hard, right? In retrospect, it's had so much momentum since you began it. But I wonder if you can talk about the kind of like, what's the moment of the bottleneck or the dissatisfaction or the sense of need and excitement and imagination that came together to get something off the ground, which is just enormously difficult. And then it's another enormity to keep it alive. So I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about, maybe in potted form, your career, and then if students have, and other attendees have questions about the details maybe later. But I think Open Style Lab is doing something so distinctive, and origin stories are always instructive. So can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so I take it back. I studied as a graphic designer at RISD, and I really loved packaging design. So when I picked up pattern making and of course fashion design by experience, I was like, wow, this is great. This is like packaging for the body, but just on paper and then on fabric. So I really find that as an example of your skills are transferable. Just because you stop one major and go into something else doesn't mean that they're completely lost. And I was able to translate some of that. I was also very curious about early on how technology was being used because my father was an engineer. And I was dragged every Sunday morning to help him fix his car. And I would look like I just came out from like a bomb shelter because I had oil all over my face trying to get home to eat my mom's lunch. And those moments and over those years had really been inspiring for me to try to apply to a tech company quite early. I started at Samsung and I worked on their cell phones and also their first, I think it's called Samsung Gear, their wearable watch that had came out when the iWatch first also came out back in like 2010, 2009. It was a while. But I was like, this is amazing. This is the first time I see fashion or what I thought was fashion or wearable merge with design and technology and graphics. And I really found that kind of vulnerability of like, I don't know what this industry is about. And they're asking me to design something that is for a wearable situation. And I had the opportunity to interview lots of fashion designers and so what, but I was quite inspired. And I think in this generation today, like pivoting is kind of the thing. And also finding, what really satisfies your goals. But I pivoted many, many times in my life. And many times it wasn't like, oh, I was fully confident and ready to go. It doesn't need to be dramatic, but I let go, to be honest, a six-figure nice tech salary to be able to start from scratch, to be an entrepreneur and a grad student. And so I think that's an extreme case, but of course, if you read like Atomic Habits and other books, you could probably take it at a bite-sized level of what do I really want to explore. But to me, it was a little bit existential. I was like, oh, I love what I'm doing, but there's so much more that I want to be making. And when you're coming from a corporate arena, you're usually in a large team of people. Maybe you get to see your outcome when it's out in the market, or it's kind of, I think, like blended in with everybody else's team effort. But I uniquely wanted to make something of mine. And I wasn't sure what that was, but I attended a lot of fashion shows in my time in Korea when fashion, language, and I think a lot of the European influence of Vogue and Condé Nast was happening in Asia, particularly in South Korea, and K-pop was rising. And so I took the chances outside of work to like really be more involved, right, into that industry and into that field. The same attitude I had was when I had started with Open Style Lab. I had my own disability experience when I was in college. Pretty much I had to recover from a hit and run of a car accident. But that I think wasn't transferable to a larger community or a need. And I attended like, I think the sex talk for spinal cord injury at NYU to the Breast Cancer Association for Women. And really the point is to get uncomfortable, go into places that you don't normally go to. And you never know what you may find, but I guarantee you, you will find something you don't like or you don't resonate with. And if you start deductively going backwards, which is what I did, I was like, oh, okay, I know what I don't want to do. I think this is what I kind of like, and I want to situate myself in. And I also found that there were so many missing opportunities and gaps across different fields of industry. And Open Style Lab really exists because it addresses that gap. At the moment, a lot of the clothes looked pretty medicalized. They weren't mass produced at all back in like 2014. And every time we did a program, someone would come up to me and be like, bless your heart, like you're doing such a kind, charitable work. And I'm like, that's not the point. But thanks. And I think you got to take that with a grain of salt, especially if you're trying to do entrepreneurship while paying for your grad school, right? And these are all kind of more extreme examples, but I think if you know yourself, and to me, I get bored easily. I'm a little bit of like, I need to hustle. I need to do something that makes me set a fire and a flame. That is kind of what drove me to do what I did and to find the community that I wanted to find. Because I knew design and technology and all these wonderful tools that we have were not accessible to one of the largest minorities in this world. And in doing so, it's not charitable, but really innovative. And I found so many great things in doing it. And also, I think we were very proud to say there's 5 marriages that came out of Open Style Lab. So we have lifelong friends and people that got married. It really became not just a fluffy word called community, but really some of the best relationships I've had in my life. Enough to write about it for 8 years.
Wow, okay. Well, so, I think in terms of, maybe you can tell people just the snapshot of the mechanics of Open Style Lab, because one of the other things that I admired about it is that it assumes that the students who were going to be part of it needed to have paying jobs elsewhere, but this was another kind of add-on experience that would go through their summer. So maybe you could just as a snapshot, talk about that structure. But what I really want to get to is something that I know a lot of students have questions about, which is that Open Style Lab, as in the Rachel example, organizes itself out of the very bespoke, very, particular specifications, needs, but also wishes and lifestyle kind of arrangements of a very particular person. And very often when we talk about design, people have a kind of idea that if you're either designing for one person and then you've made exactly one-off, or you are obeying the logic of manufacturing at scale to the tune of 100,000 or 1 million widgets that are produced at that economy. So I guess like a little structural snapshot of Open Style Lab would be great, just because I think it's so ingenious as a structure. And then can you address like what do you do when that question of like does it scale come up, because it is one of those just automatic questions in people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the best question. But pretty much OSL has run a flagship program over the summer. The rest of the year, we do a lot of R&D research and workshops that are engaged with community, sometimes online. Sometimes they're driven by our community, such as like, how do you talk about whining and dining as a disabled person? And somehow style comes into a conversation into that. It's sometimes even led by an occupational therapist who is also disabled to talk about topics that are relevant, like shoes, for example, and heels. But the summer program is our flagship, and we invite not just students, but they've been arranged from college students to an OT that was like, she was like almost 60. So it's really like anybody post between that age. So anyone in college and after who wants to work in an interdisciplinary way. And they are set up in teams with, of course, individuals with disabilities. But the prompt each year is really driven by a few explorations in our research, where we found, of course, every disability is living on a spectrum and unique to its own person. But there are some common denominators between disability and aging that I have discovered through the company for the last decade. And those common denominators are similar to how someone who has Parkinson's may have the same pant or design need as someone who has spinal cord injury. And so therefore, like, it's not just a unique outcome that comes out, but it becomes a universal almost application that could be for a broad range of disability life cases. And that research is explored each summer. Like last year, it was around shoes because it was still the #1 problem for our community that they couldn't find. So we worked with Steve Madden, we're still working with them right now to kind of closely tie in more of an industry partnership. We also opened up a branch in the UK because they seemed very keen on talking about accessibility and innovation and design, and it was timely. And you hear my baby, of course, clapping away. I'm a new mom. My child is a little above the 1-year range, so very vocal. it's another disability to talk about. But anyway, life happens. And within that, we see that spectrum, and how to design for one case really opens up to a broad range of cases. And that's kind of what is encouraged in the program. We've had like bespoke examples, like a laced jumpsuit for someone who had cerebral palsy using a wheelchair. And yes, it's bespoke, but it's also demonstrating in the language of fashion and style that disabled people deserve also to be in haute couture and in high level customization, bespoke kind of garments, but also B, that it is possible. So when we invite industries to our final show after the program is done, we pretty much demonstrate a product that is possible. And for many years, like Nike, I think Macy's, Tommy Hilfiger, before they had put up their apparel line, they would be like, what does that look like? What does like a disability garment that looks beautiful, sexy, and functional for other people look like? And so we pretty much demonstrate, that is possible by literally doing the program. In doing so, we also serve the community. So the program is almost a triple fold of community service, but also a demonstration to industry of what innovation is possible. And then, of course, interdisciplinary learning that is a spectrum of age and different disabilities alike.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So you're year round kind of you're sort of surveying en masse, like what are going to be some particularly potent areas, and then you partly do the matches with individuals in the summer to kind of like speak to that. So you both are able to give the teams the latitude to really focus on one person, but you've already done the background research to know this has got a kind of applicability outside of this particular. Yeah, that's really interesting. And then just so people know, it runs on evenings and Saturdays, right? So that people can do it on top of a full-time job, or?
Yes, it's on mostly Saturdays on the weekends, but sometimes we do some Zoom in the evenings, or we do in-person fabrication, which is why we're talking about fabrication today, because
Yeah.
you just can't finish making in like a one Saturday over 10 weeks. We sprinkle that along like twice a week. And we've partnered with Brooklyn Navy Yard for almost 2 years to kind of bring that to life, because they have a huge center of a lot of fabrication, but they also have people who have volunteered their time to train and work with our fellows, and also disabled applicants. So it's a good win.
And then like, what would you point to as a kind of like, can you think of a couple of other garments where that kind of like hot, closely attuned attention to one person's seemingly bespoke need or wish did translate into a kind of object that has gone into mass manufacturing that we might recognize? Can you point to a couple of other? I'm thinking about the raincoat with a clear placket here at the seat, or other things that people, just to demonstrate that kind of like, it really is a relationship between the very particular and idiosyncratic and the more general.
Yeah, we've had several rain jackets that emerged, and this wasn't by purpose. I just kind of let it be and let the fellows, our researchers, and our team kind of bring about the outcomes. And it was never really about the clothing outcomes. It was really more about the process and the types of questions that arises from that outcome. So from those rain jackets, we found out, there are many ways to have seated and haunched and standing, whether you're a bike rider, or you're using a wheelchair, or you're like me and you're haunched like 80% of the time trying to chase your child, and it's in the rain. So there's many ways to think about posture, I think, and garments. And we've kind of demonstrated through maybe like 5 or 6 rain jackets that came out over the last decade that there are ways to design for that. So it's not just disability specific, but I would almost say, as most fashion is, it's occasion specific. It's time, occasion, and place. And it becomes a social participation matter, not just a weather problem when you can't find something to get to a funeral. You can't find something for a job interview. Like, I missed my job interview when I was in college because I was still recovering from a car accident. And so I remember I couldn't button my shirt. It took me like 40 minutes to do that with one hand. And by that time, I was late. I couldn't go to the career fair. And so clothing doesn't just become, and why we don't say fashion, open fashion lab, it's open style lab, because it's more about self-expression and really just a basic human right, you know, at that point, like food and shelter. So if you can't clothe yourself for an occasion, you are socially outcasted, whether it's your job or it's for, you know, your parents' funeral, which I think I had heard from a colleague a long time ago who applied.
And so what are some of the like just actual features of those raincoats? Like, for
Oh,
example,
yeah.
yeah,
So pretty common features I've seen was like elbow abrasion. Many times if you're in a seated position, when you're rolling, especially a manual wheelchair, your elbows and your sleeves get pretty damaged. So if you had to buy a Gore-Tex jacket every month, that's pretty expensive, right? Or a raincoat. And so how do you find the right appropriate areas to protect your garment? Almost like having shoes that aren't too worn out. So we partnered with a lot of companies in manufacturing back in the day, especially when we were at MIT, for their leftover materials that would go into like Under Armour, Adidas, and Nike. And so this kind of abrasion fabric material was like heavy duty. It was almost for like military grade, but it was super light. And so we applied patches of that leftover fabric that they couldn't sell anyway to Nike because they didn't have enough rolls to the under area of the elbow to reduce the amount of wear and tear for a garment. So that's one feature example for a rain
Yeah.
jacket.
and then wasn't there one with a clear lap placket so that you could have a phone for directions? But
Yeah.
protected from the rain while seated or using a chair, you know, I thought that was ingenious as a kind of really basic switch out, you know, of the material affordances. Yeah. Do you have that in the deck by chance? A raincoat?
Jacket.
Or is there may be one in the book
I
that's
think
don't.
so. Yep, there's definitely one in the book. It's with
Yeah,
Q.
yeah, okay,
my
so
friend.
here, yeah, that's great. Well, so Grace, like, when people come to you, I mean, so students and young people I find who are interested in this field tend to worry a little bit. I mean, if they are themselves disabled, then they might feel some like invitation and ownership. And so wonderful, right? We want more disabled designers in the world always. Some folks who are interested in this maybe have some skin in the game or just, you know, because of their relatives or close friendships, or they just are feeling like this is a kind of wedding together of socially minded purpose and fabrication. But sometimes they come to me and say, I'm not sure I'm allowed to work in this space because I don't myself have a disability.
Yeah, that's definitely a great question and
Yeah, so
something around.
talk a little bit about that. I have my own strong views on this matter. But I'll give
I
you-
honestly think like disability or not, you are a person. And at one point, and it's like the one experience everyone in this room is going to have, especially as you get aging and as we get older. So regardless of like if I've had it from an accident, I was born with it, never had it. I guarantee you, I look at my mom who's now hitting her 70s, you will find some strange experience. If you ever get pregnant, oh, you best believe you're gonna feel like this is really strange. Accessibility now becomes my issue. So even though if you don't feel that agency now and that appropriation, I feel like it's not a space for you to carry by yourself. It is a space that is shared amongst many people and of course seen throughout a lifetime. And if you have that kind of wide view and that kind of curiosity, I think it shouldn't prevent you from trying to navigate or explore groups like Open Style Lab, or like I said, I sat in a sex talk at NYU for people with spinal cord injury, and I was like, hey, I think we need to talk about lingerie here and bring in a lingerie designer.
Yeah.
And that to me till this day reminds me of like you may not feel like you belong, but that is exactly the places where maybe you do, and your talents and your skills can be offered. And part of the program is everyone has their own ego and their own self-consciousness. And I love interdisciplinary programs because it really puts people in a pretty interesting spot about how to negotiate what they're good at, what they want to bring to a team, how to discuss that. And I see it with fashion students saying, this is my client, engineer students saying, this is a user. And and OT is saying this is a human being or my patient. And the disabled person is saying this is me. So it's a really interesting identity exercise that could also be shared through skills together. So that would be my answer.
And I heard you underline this kind of like showing up to that talk about sexuality and disability, which is still a difficult topic to talk about. I find my students are really interested in it, but it feels quite delicate. But I think I just want to underline like that you had to show up in that room and decide like, I really don't know anything about this space, but I'm taking the initiative to show up and to listen and to be curious instead of feeling like, well, this is either mine or not mine. I think in a way that is a kind of barrier to what is, after all, both an educational and democratic practice, and that is collaboration across difference. That is the whole deal in a free society. Full stop. So I really want students to not feel this kind of like excessive caution, because we need good ideas from every place, right? You are the person who doesn't have the experience of spinal cord injury, but you do have the kind of light bulb above your head about lingerie in a discussion about sexuality, right? So that is a kind of form of expertise and a know-how about making that belongs, if people want it, in an exchange of what could be on offer, right? So I want people to feel less, a proper humility, of course, right? In a good human-centered design practice, and you'll see that demonstrated in the book, but also a kind of generous bravery about the kinds of opportunities for collaboration that can happen. Grace, I wonder if you can talk about moving then into academia and why you did that and like what it is that is on your mind now as you look forward to the next, 10 years or whatever of your research. Like what's I don't mean like hurry up and follow on this book with like another whole deal, because 8 years on a book is a whole project. But I just wonder where your head is now, what you're interested in, what you're watching in the industry or in classrooms and labs.
I think, well, the first question for academia, even similar to Open Style Lab, I didn't I didn't wake up one morning and was like, okay, I'm gonna jump out of tech and then go do a startup. No. And same thing with academia. I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to become a professor. It kind of naturally blended when I started to do the work I cared about and the people I wanted to surround myself with. And Open Style Lab at that time was just a lab at MIT. It wasn't a nonprofit. When I had invited people from Parsons, from other groups of design, and just one day they were like, hey, you want to teach at Parsons School of Fashion? It's kind of prestigious. We think you could do it. And I was like, really? Great. I'll give it a shot. And that's kind of how it happened about like 8 years ago. And I continued on that track because I love one part of academia is I'm always learning from students and I'm always learning from my peers. And of course, you can get that outside in industry, but you also have to carve out a lot of space and time to do that, if especially the industry you're in doesn't align 100% with what you care about. So I'm always surrounded by, I think, people that I think are around the similar lines that are different from me and that have a passion or an idea or something of a discussion that I really am inspired by. And in doing so, I think for moving forward, I'm at an interesting place where I am now also a mom. And being a mom puts you in a lot of perspective. Things slow down. And I think I'm starting to, instead of go, 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 sussed out the things that need to be more prioritized. Not that they don't matter, but which ones come first and which ones come later. And at this point, it's not that I'm like tired, but I'm also like, I'm not in a rush. I'm gonna kind of wait and build a bigger momentum for something. And I know I've been investigating in different areas, but I'm just kind of in an area of fun and play, which I feel like we don't give ourselves the permission to do often, to just explore instead of just go, go, go. And I think when I'm in that state of play, whether I'm doodling or I'm just trying to like criticize the next stroller that comes along that isn't designed well, like I'm in a space where I'm constantly just unconsciously maybe being inspired and filtering and absorbing in our environment. So that is kind of where I am right now and where I'd like to continue for a few more years.
And I mean, it's no accident that disability studies arises from feminist philosophy and feminist legal theory. And so that is to say that the interdependent body is actually the natural state of the human, not a kind of aberration from experience, no matter how much the sort of economic worker imperative would tell us otherwise. And so there is a kind of central insight here, you know, between family making, the kind of vulnerability of the body in all states as actually, right, not a glitch in the system. No, the natural state worth designing around and for. Well, maybe I can, because I see there are questions coming in on the chat and stuff, and I don't want to delay too much, but maybe I'll just introduce or just turn it over to Gabby now to just give us a little drop down into what's available at Northeastern, just in case this is particularly on your minds. And in the spirit of the book, very practical. And I think Gabby has a slide to show. So hang on one second, Grace, and we'll come back to larger conversation in a second. Gabby, over to you. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Grace, for just bringing so much insight and inspiration to everyone here today. I will just chime in quickly with some practical applications of what you're hearing. So I'm the coordinator for the Creative Tech Lab. That's on the 3rd floor of this building, 337. And what we have are a variety of workflows that have a lot of overlap. If you think wearable tech, this is the place where it would happen. We're one of 4 maker spaces in CAMD. So we have a wood shop, a CNC lab, a laser lab, and then the tech lab. So a lot of students use all 4 spaces for any given project, but a bulk of textiles fabrication can happen in my space. And we have a really approachable sewing training. We have approachable soldering training. We try to cater everything to people doing everything in the lab for the first time, and just really promote that empowering sense of, you know, you may have been told that you couldn't do these things, but in our space you can, and we're going to show you exactly how. So we have Singer heavy duty sewing machines, and there's a guided training that you can do. You come in with one of our staff, they'll sit you down and show you exactly how to thread up the machine, and then you follow a sewing template. That's a specific part. But we also get into sergers and a whole bunch of knitting. We have 2 different kinds of knitting machines. We have a manual knitting machine and a digital knitting machine. And all of these come with smaller versions and checkoutable kits. So we have hand sewing kits for checkout, crochet hooks for checkout, as well as the whole electronic side of things. So we have a soldering room, we have physical computing supplies available, as well as physical computing kits for checkout. And this is all, you know, a place to explore and play and see how it could apply to your assignments. We cater to curriculum first. We work with classes to make sure everyone in a class is the training they need for their classes. But we also really try to encourage student exploring. So just stopping by and saying hi. But if you have any specific questions or want to set up a specific training of some sort, my email is on the screen. I would be the person to email. There's also a QR code to the CAMD Hub, as well as the URL at the bottom of the slide. The CAMD Hub has the inventory of all of our maker spaces. So each page has their own inventory list as well as their own reservation calendar. So there's a lot of information out there, but I'd really encourage you all to just stop by and take a look around and talk to myself and our student staff. We have about 24 student staff from a variety of different majors, not just CAMD, and a variety of different interests. And I have found them to be the essence of our culture. So I really encourage you to talk to them.
Can you just say 30 seconds about what the Silver Reed and the Knitterate are?
Yes. So we actually have a faculty representative, Sara Hendren, who is for us graphic design professor, and she's our resident knitting machine expert. And so she's the expert on the Silver Reed, which is a manual flat knitting machine. Basically, if you move a carriage horizontally one way, that's one row, the other way, it's another row. And it's a very fast form of knitting compared to hand knitting, if you've ever tried that. We require hand knitting before the use of that machine, mostly so it's more approachable to you, but as well as you can fully understand the time that you're getting back using this machine. Then, to take it a step further, we have a digital knitting machine called the Moderator. And it's this massive machine that you can send files to it and it will knit. So it's our CNC basically. And that's how I think of things. So that's something that Sarah and I are learning together. We had just gotten it almost about a year ago. And we are still learning so much and working out so many kinks and trying to see how we can apply it to direct student projects. And the biggest thing that we've been working on is knitting PNGs. We're trying to get the ground running for data visualization, which Laura's been a great help with. And we're just trying to show students like, this is what you can do. And we're trying to work on how you can access that like sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so like hybrid digital, analog tools, which is like a whole lot going on in addition to smart textile, right? All kinds of so. Okay, so if we could bring Grace back up, that would be great. Thank you so much, Gabby. And we'll open it up for your questions, either for Grace or for Gabby or both. What is on your minds? And I'll ask my colleague Julie to monitor the chat and add those questions in too. But I see there's a hand here. Yeah. You just speak up so Grace can hear you. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for coming today. This is awesome. I just have one question. Can you speak to the affordability of inclusive design and how it can scale affordably rather than remain niche?
Yeah, I mean, I get this question so much, but there's already a lot of products that have been inclusively designed by or for disabled people that are on the market. So like OXO grips, there's Cat and Jack for garments. And I'm not an economist or a specialization in manufacturing from product to scale, but I would say it is possible. So it depends on what your product is. If it's supposed to be for like bespoke couture, that's a whole other ballpark. If it's supposed to be for the masses, then you project the budget, that is kind of looking at how to fabricate and also labor costs, hopefully ethically, into that process. But can you specify what you mean more by that question?
More just how, I don't know how it works for people with disabilities trying to access design and fashion, if it's left up to them, or how you manage their accessibility to it.
I think I don't manage their accessibility because in my book, as you'll see, there are some disabled fashion designers who have their own company. They have their own line. So they either produce their own, either as a vertical or a horizontal. Vertical, horizontal meaning like, is it made to order? Or is it being produced in bulk to then be given to a larger distribution like a Macy's or JCPenney or Marshall's, depending if that's your target audience. And then of course, if you think about, if it's not just individual designers, you could consider maybe larger groups like Cat and Jack is part of Target's sensory line. So they're actually within Target's design team and led by Target's design team. So it depends on who and what. I hope that helps.
And so like you guys are talking to Steve Madden now, you said, and in the space of Open Style Labs tenure, I want to say is like the Tommy Hilfiger, line for wheelchair denim and so on, I want to say. So I mean, I think of Open Style Lab and your work, Grace, is almost like a prod to industry, and some of whom are producing at scale. To bring this to the fore, and you'll see Oil of Olay. I mean, the scene has really changed, wouldn't you say, Grace? Since you and I have been kind of doing this work, like you'll just see like Oil of Olay had a whole. I mean, I think they took it off the market eventually because it has to obey such a kind of economy of scale, right, to justify its existence. So not everything comes to the market and stays, but they had a cold cream jar that had little fins on the side to just like ease that opposing motion for opening it. But they led, like their splashy ads in Vogue had the disabled women who were their kind of beta testers for this. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't even like they were trying to say like it's for everyone and sort of put the disability origin story in the background. It was like right up in the foreground. And that is a big change. Wouldn't you agree, Laura, from the last 15 years or something, in terms of the messaging and then therefore the kind of interest in companies, right? Where they can't manufacture everything. But like Magna Ready is a company that produces button-down shirts that have a magnetized button. So they have a button that looks like it goes through an opening that you would do manually, but instead it's got a magnetic closure. So that's for people who have been wearing button-down shirts their whole life. Perhaps they get Parkinson's later in life. They want to preserve that sense of continuity. That's a shirt that runs $70 on Amazon now. It's not universal in the way that the OXO good grips are universal, we'd say, as like a better mousetrap ergonomically, but it is a kind of mid-scale. And maybe that's what you're thinking about too with these disabled designers in the book who have their own companies. They operate at that kind of mid-scale. They pay their bills, have a small structure. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. In the last chapter, I kind of cover from like design entrepreneurs, disabled or not, and then larger companies, what that means, and then industry, because every industry, sometimes they're like, we want to do something universal, or they want to have a very specific adaptive line. It's really about more of the company ethos and their MO, to speak. So it depends, you know, if it's coming from that narrative or if it's from an individual, and what their objective is.
Thank you. What else is on your minds? Yeah, right here.
Hi, thank you for your talk today. I'm very excited that you mentioned Dr. Alper. I had a class with her last year with youth and communication technology, which is, I'd say, I study graphic design. So it's a cool like interdisciplinary opportunity focusing on young people. And one thing that I was interested about when it comes to working with people with disabilities and prioritizing accessibility is this almost as an able-bodied person with like a savior behavior where people will treat people with disabilities in a sense like, oh, like let's say with Rachel's example, like, oh, if this person can, if an amputee can do this, then you can too, that kind of weird, muddy ground. I'm curious how you approach that because I was interested in how you said like, it wasn't out of kindness, it's out of function, innovation. So I'm curious how you find a balance of sharing those values and working in that space.
Yeah, I think the first 4 weeks of our summer program is for that. And I call it like partial therapy and dismantling assumptions. And it's really about how we talk about disability and bringing a lot of speakers, my best friend Christina, of course, and lots of people who I think kind of destigmatize that language. And it's not to say that you will just be left hanging dry if you applied for the program to just figure out how to converse with people. But the biggest advice I would ever give to anyone is just like any other person. How do you greet them? Do you just say hello? Do you want to be addressed as a miss, Mr.? Can I say you by your first name? Right? It's just common courtesy. That's it. And then slowly over maybe a course of a week or so, as you get to know someone, you'll see how they identify, maybe with their pronouns, how they wish to be identified by their disability. Sometimes they say person with disability or disabled person, different preferences. So I think as you get to see the richness of working with one individual, it'll hopefully open up a bit more confidence, especially if you don't have a disability, to then carry forward to work with more people.
Chat question. Sure.
Grace might be able to see it in the chat, but I'll read it for our audience. Kira would like to know, it's kind of a two-part question. Would your fellowship be looking for disabled designers who already have an idea or concept? And what master's programs would you recommend or know of that specialize in adaptive design? They've only seen one at Parsons and one at UCL London.
Yeah, so for the first question, it's a no. We don't really allow any fellow with their own perceived design or concept because this isn't like a Shark Tank to take your ideas to market or to test them. We actually kind of discourage that even from our guest speakers if they want to talk about their own products because it's not here for selling. We have an agenda that's a research that is driven by like thousands of other people in our community as like a focus each year. And they take a vote each year to find out what topic of focus is what we want to explore. So that is really going to be very apparent. You'll probably see it announcement like March or April of like, this is the theme this year. Do you want to apply with us and explore? The second question, yes, there's a lot of master's programs, but I don't think there is one that screams out adaptive apparel. But there are many, I think, programs arising, especially in the UK, that are very interdisciplinary. I would say like their perspective, accessibility, and designing for disability is a little more interwoven into the structure. Whereas in the States, it's like an elective, or it's like maybe if you get the professor as the major, like myself, then you'll be teaching it for your final. But I haven't seen one that screams out apparel design per se, and only, adaptive apparel design. Usually it becomes like, oh, that would be my focus if I take this 2-year program on apparel design.
I did. Thank you so much, Grace. As I was flipping through your book, I found myself very taken by the like different kinds of research that you're bringing together and the like vast amount of space that it covers. But my question is around the how-tos. I'm wondering what kind of considerations go into choosing those specific examples.
Do you mean examples as in materials?
The how-to, like the little tutorials or the pattern examples that you.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
between chapters.
So you mean the pattern designs, right? And those instructions. Yeah, I chose them because they came up so many times in my class. And at Open Style Lab, I was like, these are redundant. I definitely have to put in these so I don't have to talk about them again. But here I am at last. But like pockets, seams, like the elbows that I had mentioned for abrasion, different types of placements for buttons and how to stitch them, especially if they're magnets so they don't stick onto anything else. Like those are kind of more technical questions I get a lot around apparel. And of course I couldn't fit in everything, but maybe that'll be for another day. Those are like the top highlights that I keep seeing. So I put them in that way.
So among the design process steps in your experience, which part has posed the greatest challenges? Is it the research, is it the prototyping, or is it the scaling to market?
I think first one is actually observation. People don't take the time enough to be unbiased, stake back, and observe how behavior or the environment equates to factors in design choices. And that takes a time of luxury to just kind of step away, to look at it. And it's in my book as one of the most crucial steps, I think, that is quite challenging to do because everyone jumps to conclusions or they want to say something in an interview. The other one is rapid prototyping. I find that is sometimes hard to do in an interdisciplinary team. Because if you're just with a bunch of designers, you're like, sure, let's all make and figure it out individually. But when you're with an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, or you're with a person with a disability, how do you negotiate equity? How do you negotiate who makes what? And of course, how do you do that together? So the making of the fast prototyping is something that I see as one of the most challenging things, but most rewarding as well.
Sort of. We had somebody who was hoping to see more examples of actual garments and things like that. I think maybe they might have joined a little late as well.
Okay, yeah.
So I was wondering if Grace could put those slides back up for a minute or two.
Sure.
Also, because I do remember a picture of the lap packet that you mentioned.
Yes, thank you, yeah.
How's this? This one? Or I guess this one?
Yeah, that.
Grace, I remember being really taken with the example of Justin, and I know you've got one image of him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
And the red.
yeah, and this particular sweatshirt, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that sweatshirt operates, because I know it's got a really clever zipper.
Yes. So a little bit about Justin, brilliant boy, still a Boston native. Him and his family had really revamped his house to be, I think, accommodating to his disability, but had designed it in really unique ways. And he has muscular dystrophy. And so Justin has a posture that is continuously kind of more of a 90-degree angle or less. And we were thinking about how do we create a sweatshirt or a jacket that he has always wanted that doesn't bunch up in the front and create overheating, but he's able to zip almost by himself with some assistance, but instead of having a lot of assistance. And so the garment on the right, which is partially a part of it, is the top portion, and that is the red garment that you might see under the word educational. It opens from the top down, so his mother would be able to zip out the hoodie to the back, so he'll be able to put his arms in very quickly, almost like a shell. And then in the front, he was able to use one, I think his right hand, to be able to zip up the rest from the front as he needed. So this garment, it was more about, I would say, body motion as a kind of observation and finding the appropriate closures and openings of a garment to be able to facilitate his desired, outcome and his desired garments that he wanted. It's kind of like a sweater meets a rain jacket. The fabric was quite unique.
And what was the theme on the year that Justin was a partner?
It was fashion and technology, because a lot of, like, they had 3D modeled Justin's body measurements as well, to really get a 360 view. So they were using tools like Rhinoceros, I think like free apps at that time that was able to body scan to give a general idea of what that looked like, or a general kind of circumference as well. And it was upon the theme of fashion and technology because it had a lot of material science behind its operation as well. So a lot of the silver themes, all of those were like heat bonded with pretty high grade machinery that you see in like scuba gear and also like ski wear. They reflect light, so he's able to wear this garment in the dark as well. So after school, when it gets dark, he was like, yeah, I want to be able to have this outside, even if I'm in prolonged hours.
Yeah, and so this is an example, I think, where, like, just to go to your question before about like what's the relationship to scale manufacturing, like I think, in the fashion industry at large, companies are playing with mass customization, right? Whether it's sort of like picking the colorway of your sneakers or the availability of an unusual hem as an extra service of a surcharge or something. And I guess, Grace, when I look at this for Justin, which is very much, again, a very bespoke, particular exploration, as you said, of technologies that are coming to the fore, but results in a product that is not going to be scaled literally itself. But my assumption is that at the showcase that you do at the end of the summer, you're hoping to influence people in industry who are thinking about what would be the mechanism of mass customization that might be applicable broadly within their either a line, as you said, or implemented more widely. Am I right in thinking that there's an associational rather than a kind of literal implementation of
Yes.
idea? Is that right?
Yeah, because there's so many components to a garment. So like we would get like YKK, which is the largest manufacturing for zippers, like come in and be like, oh, I never knew you could use it this way. Or we'd get a wool company that comes in and says, oh, I never knew you could use performance material for this kind of audience. And so to us, it's not the literal thing. We show it as like our minimum viable product of like, this is possible. Because people keep asking us like, why do we have to care? And then industry is usually pretty convinced in their own discipline and in their own sector of how to take that through their department and of course to their manufacturing line.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot underscore how genius this is enough, right? Because I have met the people who designed the OXO Good Grips, which is a canonical example of universal design. Those designers will tell you that there are all kinds of design challenges that they do not take up because they don't obey this logic to land in the big box store under $10, right? And I understand that. They have a constraint, they have to keep the lights on, they have a clientele, they have to make things that not only, yes, improve the world, but do obey that logic, right? But so Grace is trying to do something else, which is to wedge open a space that's like, look, we're not going to suggest to you that a sweatshirt for Justin, which that, by the way, really has to work for him, a high performance way. We're not going to suggest to you that this is the widget, again, that goes out literally at mass manufacturing. But it opens up a space of possibility. And then it has this convening power of occupational therapists, engineers, and fashion folks, and then brings in industry as an audience to say, have you ever thought of the what if question, you know, on display? Like, I just think that is a genuinely brilliant choreography of ideas, you know, and that's the deliverable.
Yeah, we don't pretend to know like
Yeah.
what this industry is going to do with it. I think that's actually quite pretentious to be like, we're going to know exactly what Macy's is going to do with this, right? We don't even know their manufacturing capability. We don't know anybody from their team except for the ones that have attended. And so I think as a designer, you really have to have some ownership, but also be very comfortable with letting go with some facets that it will not be literally taken. I learned this a lot from talking to VCs and venture capital early on at Open Style Lab, because I had always wondered structurally as a business, should this be a nonprofit, a B Corp, or a corporation? And after talking to people who are much smarter than I am, that have MBAs and different types of business degrees, I realized it's a whole different ballpark. And when you want to take a product to market or a service to market, and I think that's what that expertise is for. You can't do everything. If you do, sure, great. That's what I think an entrepreneur could kind of entail. But I guarantee you, most entrepreneurs are not alone. They either have to have some co-founder or some funding or be scrappy enough to generate their own, you know, I guess accumulated wealth to be able to launch something. But for us, I purposely chose this structure as a nonprofit because of the 3 pillars that we abide to each year as a 501c3. And I thought that was important because we're not here to make a business out of people's lives who have been gracious enough to share with us in this community, but more so as a learning opportunity for the rest of the public to see why disabled people bring about some of the greatest innovations today. And so I think by working together, that's really the opportunity instead of the product outcome. But we made cool products because I was like, oh, I'm tired of hearing industry saying, what does that look like? You know, why do we have to care? This is still a charity. And I was thinking, I'll show you. I'll make this like real high fashion. And that was my ambition for the first 3 years at Open Style Lab, was to make it the best level of almost haute couture, stapling and function, and of course, beauty woven into it. Basically making it desirable for anybody. And if you desire it, sure, right? Wouldn't you want to try putting that out in the market?
I mean, it's like, this is where the pathway question, I think, comes up for people who are students, right? Like, there is a role for somebody to really, like the Magna Ready folks, they do one thing really well and they wanted to like bring this thing to market, and it serves a very particular need. And Grace is sort of, I mean, you said you were kind of asking for a long time, like, what structure does this want to be, right? I guess I just want you all to feel brave enough to know that like you're not always going to know right away. It can take some time and some wandering around to figure out, what is my post? You know, not what is the best post or the only post, or like it has to be this way because I'm constrained in whatever ways, but like, what is my post? What is it that I'm really good at? Where does my kind of joy and my imagination lighting up meet what the world needs? Instead of trying to be like, what are they doing or they doing? You know, but it's just going like, where can I find my slot? Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a question coming from like a digital fabrication background. So I took a look through the book and there's a lot of like awesome case studies from the Open Style Lab and the collaborations and such. But like, if one of like, are there instances of your clientele like being real excited about like this like certain garment or feature or something like that really did improve my life, and being able to like give them the patterns to possibly go off to like another like seamstress or tailor or something like that beyond the work of Open Style Lab and like within your like fellowship cohort, to like continue having agency over these tailor-made solutions and patterns that already exist towards like furthering like continuing to live with their condition. So you mentioned a lot of things about like the raincoat wear and stuff like that. So it's like we go through a lot of clothing throughout our lives. Would there be ways to replicate a lot of the work that is done beyond the scope of the fellowship?
Yeah, 2 answers to that is every program, we make 2 copies. We give it to the participant who has the lived disability experience. So they take home the actual garment and we keep one to travel through museums and such. And then the second one is we actually pivoted a lot more to toolkits. So some of the elements that you see in the garments, we were thinking, how does this become digestible for people to use as a tool? And so a few years ago, we had pockets and different sewing tools as well, because I don't know about you guys, but sewing through a needle still for me in my 40s, like I look at it and I'm like, this is tough. Can't imagine anybody with a disability feeling the same way. So I think that has shifted us to looking at tools to be able to share with more people. So they are almost like the patterns and blueprints, but many of the times the people that we've worked with, I think we've remade their garment like a few times. I've probably modified Colleen's bag like 4 times in my lifetime just to make it like easy and simple. And this is also, I want to say blockchain, but maybe a systematic problem of you take it to a tailor, but they actually don't know what to do with it sometimes. And they may not remake it in the best way. Even if the person with a disability wants to remake it, they would have to work with us again. And we've opened that invitation up a few times as well. But I treat it as like, if it's a beautiful haute couture garment, you got something from Dior, it's $10,000, you want to treat it well, and you still want to be able to keep it in a way, but would you be able to remake Dior's garment? Probably not. I think that's the kind of simple mindset that I look at some of the outcomes that are coming out from Open Style Lab. And we've had a range, some things that are very haute couture-like, bespoke, and some things that are like, wow, I could see this out of Macy's tomorrow. So it's kind of a different case by people. And it wasn't just garments. Like I said, it was shoes, it was tools, it was all types of things in the past decade. Anything that has stapled with the word style. And it really was determined on looking at someone's self-expression about how they wanted to manifest that externally. So whether we're putting sensors on it, we're exploring it as tools, it was a conversation around style and prototyping.
And people can see those kits on the Open Style Lab site, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we still sell them at the V&A and at Cooper Hewitt. We might have sold our last one at the Cooper Hewitt Museum, but there were a few times we've sold them.
I believe they're still available at Patty and Ricky as well.
Ah, yes.
What's Patty and Ricky?
It's just a website that's like pattyandricky.com.
That's fashion or sewing.
I think it's more, Grace, maybe you can speak to this a little more, the kits.
Yeah,
That were
Patty
available.
Ricky is an amazing adaptive line. And they've been around for quite some time, distributed with Macy's and other brands as well, but they were generous enough to be able to host some of our kits to be sold in tangent with some of their garments. So it's still probably available. I could look it up and send you guys that link.
Yeah, there's a question on the back.
Yeah, it's actually not a question. I just want to follow up onto the questions you just asked. I'm actually an OSL Disability Expert Fellow from 2024, which is how I found out about this event. So very exciting that there's kind of OSL alum here. But that's actually how I found out about this event happening in our region. So I'm very excited. To the question you just asked. The summer that I was a fellow, we were doing shoes, and my design fellow actually came in from London to be the design fellow for our program that summer. And I have a very ultra rare disease, so my shoes were very specific to that. But I think this goes back to the community aspect as well. Even like over a year later, she went back to London, took like specific measurements of my feet back with her, like, like different models. I think she made another 3D model, brought it back to London with her, and I'll get occasional pictures from her from time to time, just trying to remake the shoes that we had created just in her free time, because it was something that like really changed the trajectory of her, like, profession as a designer, and also something that she wanted to keep working on to impact my life. So I still get images from her. She was trying to make me some shoes for my graduation, which I think just goes to show how much of a community OSL has built, that even over a year later, like the fellows are still kind of communicating with one another, and even unofficially, like outside of OSL, trying to keep designing and making better prototypes for the disabled expert fellows that they work with.
Thank you for sharing that. Because I think it actually gets to attention in academia, which is design, build, deliver, when it's within a class, which I have done with students before. But if students are not, I mean, like you're talking about this kind of professional designer who's sort of like it's a personal lifetime guarantee sort of, right? Of this, because it's so intrinsically motivated and because it's somebody with the expertise to build things. Sometimes students, you know, we would run up against the end of the semester, and I don't know if this happens at OSL sometimes. You know, getting to the end where you deliver like a working product. Too few young designers appreciate just how hard that is, right? It's all really great to be in like the idea land, we're ideating, we're rapid prototyping. You're gonna deliver a working thing at the end. And you can get into ethically tricky territory, right? If you don't actually deliver, or if you deliver a kind of 80% or 87% or 92% kind of model. And I mean, to be honest, I've done less of it in the space of a semester because it's gotten hairy a bit, you know, like or we've done something where students deliver the 92% and then it has a handoff to a professional designer for a 2.0 version or something. But so I love hearing that this is a kind of like, you sort of enter into a non-transactional relationship, you know, by OSL. Do you want to say anything about that, Grace? Just that difficulty?
I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in a place where it was grad school for me. Like I showed that example of what I made. Did I think that was going out to market? No, but it definitely helped one person's life and it definitely educated me on what I was able to meld in together from my experiences and really put to the test when you're at school. Like, what are you capable of doing? And how could you experiment to the best of your ability? And till this day, I look at that as like my first prideful kind of accomplishment of like putting something tangible together by myself. Like I sewed those 7 jackets. I put in those sensors and I coded it like night after night. And I also went to a lot of breast cancer association type of workshops for like 4 months. So I think to me, it's just a small, yes, of course, experience in my life over the grand scheme, but a super important one that I was able to just find meaning and I think a lot of learning from. And even though it doesn't have a direct transactional value of like it's not seen at a market or it's not patented or you know the person didn't keep it forever, I still have a relationship with that person. Like 8 years, I had to email Dorothy. I was like, hey, how's the jacket going? She's like, I actually got only 2 of the 7 left, but still good. I was like, you okay with me putting a photo of us working together in this book for Bloomsbury? She's like, sure. Can you give me a copy? I was like, that'd be great. And so, like, I think it's a great way to weave in relationships, even though they're not maybe your closest relationships, but they are still part of a important part of your life as you design any type of product or idea because it involves people in some way.
I mean, to that end, do you want to ask something else?
Oh, just.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have one last question and it's, what is the most common client constraint or the most surprising gap in general fashion functionality that you've come across?
Gap in fashion, like a
I guess a need that just surprisingly isn't met in general for people with disabilities.
I actually am not that surprised anymore. Sorry. It's because after do some digging, I was like, oh man, like fashion houses like that image of Hermes, they have things like that are accidentally accessible. It's just at a ridiculous price point, but also no one's really coined it as disabled fashion. And then you also have disabled fashion designers in the 70s who had worked with like Levi's, mentioned in my book as well. So I'm like, these opportunities have all existed. My theory is it's a lot about timing. When do those timings actually come? When is it actually relevant? When do more people see it? And so that's why we continue doing what we're doing. So I would say, sorry, that's such a generic answer, but I'm not as surprised with any gaps anymore because I feel like someone's done it already, but not in the industry that you think it is in, I guess.
I will just say, unless I'm gonna scan the room. Chat, can I ask my question? I mean, It is surprising when anybody keeps a nonprofit alive for more than 10 years, Grace. That takes a whole separate hustle. So I wonder if you can talk about your learning curve about how to keep it going. Like,
Yeah, I'm actually very proud to say I'm on the board now. I'm president of the board, so I don't do the day-to-day operations of my company. It's actually led by Yasmin Keats, who is our executive director. She's also a person with a lived disability, and she's actually spearheaded our division also in the UK. And I think part of that is like you could only do so much by yourself. I knew at some point in my leadership and in my career if I wanted to scale, I would have to mentor, invest, and be able to also bring in. At that time, my goal was to have at least 70% of our employees have a disability and meet that aspiration within 3 years. So you have different goals as you do a company. Money is definitely one of them. And I think it's been very interesting navigating the nonprofit world to talk about money because in the very beginning I had invested in my own because I believed in this so much. And after that, you look at sponsorships from either corporations, federal grants, other types of giving. And sometimes you'll even get somebody who's got just some accidental, bystanding opportunity that saw you on the New York Times. And she's like this 80-year-old lady and she will write you like a 20K check right on the spot. And I think it really is a testament of like grit. If you want to keep something to keep going, you're going to have so many failures. I've had so many. I think I've had like 20 grants already rejected. I could list off the top of my head. Reapplied probably to maybe like 5%. And yeah, I think pitching it to many people and different audiences really help. I think if you're scared of that, that's the first thing I would do. It's just keep talking about it to as many people. They'll introduce you, and sometimes it's not monetary, but you never know who you might meet who will introduce you to somebody else that is critical for the company that you're building. And I've taken every opportunity with as much of an open mind as I can without, imposter syndrome of just like, here we go again, year 8, let's go. And just be humble enough to embrace that you'll be able to still thrive. And it is a long-term game. To me, I always thought long-term, which is why I didn't take VC funding in the beginning. VC funding to me still felt like it would have fast-tracked our company very quickly because you would have certain expectations from the person who's giving you the money. So it's great because you can get employees quickly and ideas generated, but at what expense? And I made that hard decision to say no to like a couple of $1 million a long time ago. But I don't regret it. And I think that's a couple of things that you just learn when you try to build a company.
wow, amazing.
Chat question.
Yeah. I think last question will be from the chat. So Julie will read it.
Do you think the sharp rise in invisible disabilities post-COVID will positively affect fashion, and how so?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think even before COVID, especially with technology for people who have moderate to less severe or obvious permanent, like, vision impairments, like you can't tell if someone's blind unless they tell you sometimes. And for example, but vision impairment is like #1 in the United States. It's like the big thing in the healthcare space where like everyone's going to have a problem with because we just have, aging coming upon us. But I think it's already been in some parts of fashion dialogue, like I had mentioned, but it's not labeled as like, garments for the visually impaired. Of course, one student that I had her thesis actually for that very reason. But there are many ways to approach design and in fashion, like how to evoke our senses that I think the people who have visually impaired have taught me on how to like explore. And it doesn't necessarily always need to be, I think, around the eyes, but it could be tactile, it could be about hearing, it could be different ways that clothing is experienced. And these are some things I've seen throughout my years of like, oh, cool idea, would definitely benefit the visually impaired, but not direct. And then I guess the other question is the invisible disabilities is such a large spectrum. Now we have also a little bit of cognitive woven into there. So I think it's really determined by your scope. And like I said, with Sarah's question of how can you get so particular but also relatable to other people, that's constantly a tug and pull you'll get everywhere. And fashion is a perfect example of like haute couture versus ready wear, right? Like who could actually wear that heavy beaded garment by Chanel versus Zara sweatpants. And so it's like a visual example of that tension. But I find that it is everywhere in every aspect of design and especially business.
Well, join me in thanking you, Grace and Gabby, for spending your time with us today. Really fantastic.
Thanks so much for having me. Always a thrill. I love this crowd. And I wish I was there a little bit, but I got a 13-month-old that's eating like a lot of things that I never thought I would have to cook. So.
Yeah. So it's good to be home. I mean, and I'm glad you could be with us this way. Seriously, thank you for your work, Grace. It just builds the field in so many ways. And yeah, we appreciate your time.
Thank
Congrats on the book. Yeah,
you.
thank you so much.